even if you feel like you have a healthy relationship with alcohol, you're still disrupting your sleep. You're still disrupting your blood sugar. You're still dehydrating yourself. And it's still impacting how you feel on a daily basis when you're using it versus when you're not.
You've mentioned in your book, the story of your health is the story of your life. And for those listeners who've never had exposure to a functional medicine doctor, I want to just talk about some of the lifestyle changes that people can make and how certain things may be affecting them that they have no idea about. You mentioned that two of the most common diseases that you would see in your patients were anxiety and fatigue. And I was curious, I obviously, we know what fatigue is, but what is the medical definition of fatigue? How does someone know if they're in that category of fatigue?
Right. Like, am I just tired or am I like medically tired? Yes. So we talk about fatigue, adrenal fatigue, burnout, right? And the World Health Organization has, classified burnout as a real medical condition and a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that we define it is that if everyone has a day where they feel tired, that happens. But if you feel tired most of the day, every day, it's interfering with your ability to get through your life. It could be a sign of depression. It could be a sign of sleep deprivation. It could be a sign of a hormone imbalance, like a thyroid or adrenal issue. It could be a sign of a nutrient deficiency. And so if this is ongoing for you and really interrupting your quality of life and your ability to do the things you like to do, hold a job, hold relationships, enjoy your existence here on this planet, then it's a real problem, and something that's more than just, maybe I didn't get a good night's sleep last night.
Speaking of which, you also mentioned that the perfect temperature for sleeping is about 67 to 69 degrees. So I'm at a situation now where I normally sleep well. I'm in Mexico City. There's no air conditioning here. And it's like, 80 degrees. So I have a fan, but I find it very difficult to get into that deep quality sleep that I'm used to. Is there a workaround for that if you don't have access to any kind of cooling mechanism to get the temperature down?
Oh, it's really tough. If you're sleeping in a hot environment, you can do everything else that you can do, right? You can turn on your fan, you can sleep in light clothes, maybe just a sheet and not a big blanket. You can manage all the other factors you can control, like making sure it's dark, eye mask, earplugs, right? Mm-hmm. Not eating too big of a meal too close to when you're going to bed so that your body isn't heating up in its digestive processes kind of like right before bed. Avoiding alcohol, because alcohol interrupts our body's ability to reach that lower body temperature as well as lower heart rate. And you need those two things at night to reach full sleep cycles. So a lot of people don't realize that substances they may be using, like alcohol, like nicotine, are actually interrupting that ability. And then my favorite tool for, especially given I get to talk to you today, is meditation, right? Putting your body and your head in a state of true rest and relaxation before bed can really help too, even if you can't cool that room down to 67 degrees. And now there are these cool cooling pads that people buy that plug into the wall that actually cool your mattress, and can help you just cool the mattress down if you don't have AC, or even if you do. We have one. My husband really likes it. I like it a little bit less because I don't know, I sort of find it funny, but I also run cooler than he does. So he really, really likes it. So check those out too.
Say a little more about drugs and alcohol and the line between use and abuse, because you make a point in that in your book a few times.
Yeah. I think that, first of all, I want to separate addiction. So alcohol addiction or drug addiction is a disease. It's not a habit. And not, in that a choice. And then I think there's also a really great big group of people who are living somewhere in the gray zone of maybe they are not suffering from addiction, but there's alcohol or drug misuse or abuse in a way that's disruptive, even if they're not addicted. And this isn't a medical term, but I always ask people, are you using these substances to feel better or to feel even better? But if baseline you feel bad and you're using them to feel better as opposed to even better, that might be a clue that the way in which we're relying on these substances to manage our stress is unhealthy. And in addition to that, I note that, using them more than a couple days a week, if it becomes a regular habit, no matter who you are, even if you don't have any issues with addiction, is depleting your health. So I recommend people keep it to 2 or 3 nights a week at most if they're going to drink alcohol. And that's because your body needs time to recover, to detoxify. And even if you feel like you have a healthy relationship with alcohol, you're still disrupting your sleep. You're still disrupting your blood sugar. You're still dehydrating yourself. And it's still impacting how you feel on a daily basis when you're using it versus when you're not. So it's not about judging people. It's about offering people some insight into the things that they're doing that could be actually really sabotaging their ability to have the mental and emotional well-being that they're looking for.
Yeah, and if there was one takeaway from your book, I mean, you have so much rich information in there, but as far as lifestyle change or diet change, I would take away that, hey, I need to really lower my sugar intake because sugar is Freddy Krueger, Boogeyman, Jason, all wrapped up into one for your body. So talk a little bit about how we've become all sugar addicts in our society and what that's doing to us.
Sugar is the boogeyman. I'm just going to say it, or the boogie woman, or the boogie person.
The boogie woman.
Whoever it is, it's a problem. So we eat an absolutely extraordinary amount of sugar every single day, as on average. And even those of us in the health and wellness world who feel like, hey, I'm paying attention to this, you're still eating an incredible amount of sugar every day. And so many of our drinks and juices and smoothies and bars and all of these things have just a mother load of sugar in them beyond what is healthy. And we should be max consuming 25 grams a day, according to UCSF Sugar Science and all the research they've done. And most people are eating something like 70 something grams a day. And so why do we care? Well, what's happening in the body is that you are sending all of your systems into disarray. Chronically high blood sugar and eating too much sugar leads to chronic inflammation in the body. It leads to chronic inflammation in the brain, which is associated with anxiety. It is disrupting your gut microbiome, and those bugs in your gut make good neurotransmitters that help balance your mood. It's disrupting your immune system's ability to function. It's sending your hormones out of whack and sending your menstrual cycles all over the place. And it's causing weight gain, right? So sugar in the quantities that we have become accustomed as a culture to eating is unhealthy. And it does take a lot of vigilance to move from a place where we are consuming that just sort of by default to not. But when we do, our digestion gets better, our energy gets better, we fight off colds and flus better, we have more clarity and focus, we sleep better. And so it can really be transformative. And so I invite people to run that experiment for themselves for 30 days. And I have a 30-day plan in the back of the book. Let people get started and say, hey, this isn't about bad or good. This isn't shoulds. This isn't, getting mad at myself because that's all a waste of time. It's just about, let's live this experiment for a month and see how we feel. And that can be just so instructive, not on an intellectual level, but on a visceral level, on a muscle memory basis. And it can be really powerful.
And I think, that's another takeaway as a core principle from your work is that just telling people sugar is bad, cut back on sugar is not really going to do the trick. People will just shrug their shoulders and just okay, but showing them why and how it connects in a real world way to kitchen table issues can be a lot more effective in getting people to adopt some of these healthier lifestyle habits, and also just giving them the baby steps and not expecting them to make a complete 180 transformation overnight, which has been an issue of mine with Ayurvedic. Some of the Ayurvedic practitioners I've seen, they give you all these protocols, take all this stuff in the morning, take all this before you meditate, take all this at night. It's just dude, I travel. I'm not going to be able to take, theoretically I could take it, but I'm not going to, or I know I'm not going to. So you have to take the baby step approach, I think, with most sort of average people who aren't really, their life isn't really centered around wellness and nutrition.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, like my life is hard to center around wellness and nutrition. You know, I've got a company and I have 3 little kids. I'm like everybody else. I'm a mile a minute and too much to do. And, you know, one thing after another, and just dealing with what is the crazy pace of modern life as a mom and as a human being. And so I can't be perfect and I can't do all this stuff, but I've I've experimented enough for myself to see when I generally eat this way, I feel more capable of living this life. And if I'm eating processed food and a lot of refined carbs and, you know, takeout and stuff, I mean, I feel foggy, I feel exhausted, I feel irritable, I want to snap at everyone. And we've all been there. And so when I know I have a choice of eat this and feel crappy and eat this and feel good so I can keep going, that's the powerful place that I want for everyone to know what their choices are, to know. And it's not that you're never going to eat the takeout or the pizza or the sugar. It's just that you're making that choice with awareness of what is good for you on a regular basis.
Yeah, and then you said something else. You said most people aren't playing with a full nutritional deck, which is amazing saying. Let's say someone is interested in making a transition, right? And but they're still eating a little bit of pizza, a little bit of the standard American diet. How effective would supplements be? Because I fall into that first category you mentioned in your book, which is most people think supplements are hocus pocus. And then other people have them overflowing out of their drawers. But I think the reason why I thought that was because, just like you said, most of the sort of the stuff you find in the grocery stores, they don't feel like they're that effective because they don't have the active ingredient, or it's been, watered down or diluted in some way. So just talk a little bit about how you think about supplements when it comes to aiding in this transition.
Yeah, it's exactly as you said, right? Some people think they're totally worthless, and other have like drawers full that they are, lost in their own houses in their supplements. And it's neither, right? It's neither of those things. And most of the supplements on our shelves are not what they say they are. They're poor quality. They have low bioavailability. They have low quantities of the active ingredient. It's like taking an antibiotic for your sinus infection, but only taking a quarter of it and wondering why the infection doesn't go away, right? That's not going to work. So evidence-based supplementation that is medical grade, meaning professional grade supplements prescribed by a doctor or licensed provider who knows what they're doing and is educated and supplement literate, can be really powerful tools. Magnesium glycinate or magnesium threonate can be a beautiful sleep aid. You're not taking them to correct a magnesium deficiency. You're taking them because it helps you sleep in a non-addictive, non-dangerous way. How awesome is that? We use the Johns Hopkins protocol for treating something called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is when you get sort of an overgrowth of bad bacteria in the gut from taking too many antibiotics or eating too much sugar. And there's an herbal protocol of professional grade herbs that are made in pharma grade facilities that can be really effective for treating that issue, and in an evidence-based way. But it's neither take a whole bunch of supplements and hope and pray, nor don't take any. I believe, and at Parsley, my practice, we believe, use evidence-based supplementation as therapeutic tools for a period of time to address a specific need. And then they can be really effective. And then they can really help people. I, for instance, personally, and many people do, have a genetic variant called MTHFR. It's not a mutation, it's just a variant. We all have a different kinds, we all have different flavors of MTHFR. And my flavors are such that I am slower at a process called methylation, and therefore I make less of serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. And taking a certain type of B vitamin, a methylated B vitamin, really helps me and absolutely helps my mood. It's also important for me to take that type of B vitamin as my prenatal or when pregnant, because that's the type that my body needs. So it's just important, I think, to understand that supplements can be really powerful tools if used in the right way and if prescribed. And at Parsley, we find we actually end up helping people save money on supplements, because instead of them sort of going to the drugstore or the grocery store and staring at that like crazy wall of supplements we've all seen and like throwing a bunch of useless stuff in your cart, we say, don't do that. Let's just use the ones that are going to work for the right purpose.
And one of the most effective supplements with zero side effects, and you don't need a prescription for it, is exercise.
Yes.
And you recommend 20 minutes a day, just 20 minutes. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. It was cool to go back to the research on exercise and mental health, because I had seen this and I sort of knew this, but sometimes you go back and actually read the thing and you're like, oh yeah. The research on exercise for mental health is extremely well established and powerful. And the evidence base to show that exercise improves depression and anxiety in 95%, whereas antidepressants medications work in anywhere from 40 to 60%, was just such a good reminder to go back and see. It's not that the medications aren't important. They can be really powerful and important tools. They absolutely can. We prescribe them too. But as a medical community, based on the evidence, we should be prescribing exercise to every single person as first-line therapy who's experiencing any form of anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue. And digging into the why of that, I was reminded that the body was designed to process emotions through movement. We were designed to process emotions through movement. And when we sit all day, 11 hours a day, staring at screens, we never process our emotions. And so they get stuck and they begin to create damage in the body. And that might sound esoteric or sort of, hey, is that like woo? And it's really not. There's actually a very clear biological mechanism by which that happens. And so we talk about that in the book. And I loved writing the book because I love walking people very simply through the science. Because I find that when people understand the science of what's happening in their bodies, we get out of the should territory. Oh, I'm bad, I didn't exercise today. And we get into the, oh, I know that when I exercise and when I move my body, whether it's yoga or weight training or HIIT or a cardio or whatever I'm deciding to do, I am moving my emotions out and through, and that I am going to have better sleep and better mental health. And that's a different place to be.
And when you said damage in the body, you reminded me of something else that was in the book. You said your issues are in your tissues. And I think you were relating that to the effects of meditation, but can we talk a little bit about that?
When we have a thought, that thought could be so brief, right? You don't even register it on the like billboard of your brain, right? It might even just be subconscious, but it could be a thought like, oh, I'm really nervous to do this podcast. I haven't done a podcast in a while. And like, it's really cool. I hope I do a good job. Or, anything that I'm nervous or scared or angry about. And so I have a thought, and then I have an emotional reaction to a thought. And all of this happens in a split second. And that emotional reaction is a biochemical wave of neurotransmitters that flows through my entire body, touching every single cell. That takes about 48 hours to clear. And so when we have emotions, we have biochemical reactions that happen in our body. Our emotions aren't just in our heads, they are living in our bodies. And that wave of neurotransmitters sets off a whole cascade of reactions and can increase our heart rate and our blood pressure and our blood sugar. And if that happens once in a while, that's fine. But if that's happening all the time, all day long, you're stressed. All day long, you're running from your email lion inbox situation, or whatever it is, you're reading the news, you're looking at social media and experiencing FOMO or self-doubt, whatever it is, that constant barrage of emotional waves of neurotransmitters is impacting all of your other body systems. And over time, that can create damage and weakness in the tissues. Even something as simple as increasing cortisol suppresses our immune system. And when our immune system's suppressed, we have a slower time healing. And so connecting it all the way through is, I think, again, just an example of where it can be really powerful to understand that, and then understand how meditation and exercise allow you to, what meditation does is it kind of remaps and fills in those ruts in the road of your brain. So that instead of having the same
Mhm.
thoughts over and over again, you can start to have different kinds of thoughts, so that you can start to have different kinds of emotional reactions, so that your body can begin to heal.
I grew up, my dad was an attorney, and one of the things he used to always say is, whatever you do, don't become an attorney. So, what was your dad talking about back then? Because you initially did not go down the path of being a physician. So, what was the sort of ideology of your upbringing?
My parents were pretty cool. They were pretty open to me being whatever. They didn't encourage me
Mm.
to go into the law or medicine. My dad's a doctor, although he had been a lawyer before that. And then my mom was a corporate lawyer. And so I think that they thought, though, that I would maybe go into the law because they said I was really good at arguing.
Uh-huh.
so,
So your dad was
so
was
it's
an
a good.
attorney turned physician as well.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I was never an attorney, for the record. I had like a very, very brief stint as a paralegal where I quickly discovered
Paralegal.
that I was not, like, as my first job out of college, that I was not equipped to be in the law, or that it just was not for me. So I did not go to law school. I did not go down the path that my dad did. My dad actually practiced law, but yeah, I had the briefest taste and was clear that somebody should definitely practice securities fraud, or prosecute securities fraud, but it should not be me. That was my conclusion.
So my podcast sort of, I like to tell stories of people who transition, and I want you to just go into a little more detail around this whole coffee, Splenda, wine cycle. And what does it feel like when you're doing something that doesn't feel aligned? Like, what does that actually feel like? What are some practical, real world symptoms of that? How did you know that that wasn't your path?
I definitely lived my way to that answer. I think I didn't grow up. I grew up in Baltimore, like you said, and then the 80s and 90s, there wasn't a culture of wellness. There wasn't a culture of self-care. There wasn't a conversation about mental health. There wasn't a conversation about physical health. Physical health was about like being fit, playing sports, looking good. Maybe that's how we thought about it. And so what that translated into, I think, in my early years, especially after undergrad, was just feeling kind of lost, feeling wired and tired, feeling disconnected to my passions and what I wanted to do with my life, and feeling probably this low grade anxiety all the time. And it wasn't to the degree that I couldn't function. And I have patients who do experience that, but I think it was at a level that a lot of people live with and think is normal. And I got pretty clear pretty early on that I just didn't want to feel this way all the time. This didn't seem like the right way for my life trajectory to go. And I think I had that voice in my head saying that, but I was looking for a way out.
So you had a transition through yoga.
Yeah. For me, that was the discovery moment. It was a moment of breathing deeply, slowing down, getting out of my head and into my body. I think, like a lot of us, I was living with a concrete wall between my head and my body, like proverbially speaking. And most of us, I think, only pay attention to what's happening in our body if something's wrong, or when the wheels fall off the wagon, like when we get really sick. And we get told that, right? We get told that by our healthcare system and our culture. Go, 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 go until something breaks. And yet the body has this incredible wisdom and knowledge for us. It's telling us things that are very, very useful and valuable all the time if we listen, but I had never learned how to listen. And so yoga for me, I hadn't grown up in a culture that also prioritized any sort of spirituality. I'd never really done yoga, maybe like once or twice, but it was just not something that I was exposed to. And I thought, my first couple of yoga classes in New York, I thought it was like super weird, super strange. But I also noticed that I felt completely different, not just physically after a yoga class, but mentally and emotionally as well. And so that was my kind of big aha light bulb moment for myself, that we have this power to create a state change for ourselves every day, in some capacity, maybe not all the way, but in some capacity. And I found that. And then that sent me on this journey into working in health.
What was it that gave you the courage, though, to really to pull the trigger on that trajectory shift, that pivot towards, because you had to go do a fifth year in college. So it wasn't like an easy transition. It's like a pretty big deal.
It was a pretty big deal. It was a pretty big deal at the time. I think, when I thought back, I soul searched a bunch because I sat there and I was working at the U.S. Attorney's Office, prosecuting securities fraud as on the paralegal level, supporting the prosecutors really. And I knew I didn't really want to be doing that. That didn't feel right. It felt punitive, not helpful. And I wanted to be helpful. And so I sat down and I wrote down a lot, like, what do I want to spend my time doing? What do I like to do? I like to be on my feet. I like to help people. And then I thought, well, what did I like in college? Because I think a lot of us also, if you have it's such a privilege to be able to go to school, but then you go to school and you kind of barrel your way through and you're told you're sort of supposed to know what you already want to do. And you take all these classes and what are they about? And I thought back to some of my favorite classes. And I realized that, I had taken this course on cancer, I think second year of school. And it was at a time when my grandmother had been dying of colon cancer. And she had gotten colon cancer early in life through her history of smoking and diet, basically. That 50% of all cancers are preventable, I learned in this course. And she had developed colon cancer that way. And then she ultimately died of colon cancer early because she hadn't also gotten the right preventive screening. She hadn't gotten a colonoscopy early enough. And in that class, I think I took that class because she was sick at the time. It was sort of outside of the scope of, whatever it was I thought I was supposed to be focusing on at the time. And when I looked back at school and I remember taking that class and writing a paper on a holistic approaches to cancer therapy that had won an award at school at that time, and kind of dug into other things I was interested in, I think I sort of started to say, I'm interested in health and I like doing medical research, bizarrely. And I like understanding the biology of these disease processes. And I'm interested in public health. And so it took me a beat to tease those things out. But between yoga and those memories, it started to feel like a clue and a pattern. And so I pursued that into switching jobs into a psych research job at NYU School of Medicine, where I wasn't so sure I was interested in psych. And I ultimately did not, go into psych. I trained in internal medicine, but I got some experience with patients and I got some experience in a medical hospital setting and I got some experience in healthcare in that job. And that was enough for me to say, okay, yeah, like this makes sense. I want to do this. So I think it was a matter of listening to myself, trying something, being willing to fail, knowing that maybe I would have taken that job at NYU and I don't know, hated it and not said, no, this isn't for me either. But it was the process of, is this right? Is this right? Is this right? And then just trying to follow my heart.
Speaking of experience, can you share the story of how you started working with Dr. Oz? I just love that story.
Yes. So for those of you listening, I was the first producer for Dr. Oz's first radio show before he had a TV show. So in these days, he was mostly a cardiac surgeon at Columbia. That was like his main job. And then at the time he was writing some of his first bestsellers and he was on Oprah, the Oprah show, best show ever on television, as far as I'm concerned. He was on the Oprah show many times a year at this point, but he wasn't sort of famous the way that he later became. And he was going to do a radio show with Oprah. And I was back in my undergrad, my fifth year of college, taking bio and orgo and physics and all the courses I hadn't taken because I hadn't been pre-med in undergrad originally. So I had to go back and do all that, which is a total pain. But I was doing that and I needed a job and I wanted to be back in New York. So I was researching who is doing integrative medicine research and who is doing really good, cool kinds of public health research and interesting research at Columbia. Maybe I can get a research job. Had no idea who he was, looked up his email address on Columbia's website. and sent him a cold email and attached my resume at the last second and said, because he had gone to Penn, I think, for med school, and I was there for undergrad and post-bac. And so I said, hey, I went to your same school and I'm smart, I guess. And, I need a job in healthcare. And I've already done psych research. I've already done some research at NYU. So he called me and told me he was going to start this radio show and working with Oprah. And my dad, who's a doctor, is like, who is this person? Is this like a real person? And I was like, I think so. I'm looking him up. I'm like, he has all these degrees. Seems like he's a surgeon. Seems neat. So I took the job, and it was awesome. I learned so much there, and I'm really grateful for the experience.
Yeah. And you were volunteering, like you told him that was your offers. I would love to just volunteer for you in whatever way I can help you. And it wasn't like you were asking for him for a paid job or anything like that, which I thought was really cool that you did that and it paid off. But he said something while you guys were working together that really stuck with you, which is about a bagel.
Yes. Dr. Oz we were doing practice recordings for the show. At that time, he had never hosted a radio show before. So he was learning, and we were all learning how to do this. And we were in New York, and the Oprah team were all remote in Chicago. This is like early days of remote work. These were like podcasts before podcast was a thing, by the way. That was like what this was effectively. But we would never have used that word then, which is weird to think about now. And we were doing a practice run, I think, on nutrition and talking about the insulin response to refined carbohydrates. And he said, eating a bagel plain is like throwing a grenade in your stomach. And you'd be better off putting on some butter or some cream cheese or some sort of fat to slow down your insulin response to keep your blood sugar spikes lower. And I was like, and I thought about the way I thought about nutrition for like literally my entire life. Everything we learned in the 80s and 90s, don't eat any fat, carbs are fine. And it threw all of that upside down and just made me realize, here I am trying to go to med school. I wasn't in med school yet at this point, trying to be in health. I know clearly nothing about health and what it is that I'm eating every day and how it's impacting my body. How on earth does anybody else know this too? And I was just so fascinated by all of the information that I got to learn from him. And really a lot of it came from reading the books of all the people who would be guests on the show. And so I would have to read all their books every week. I'd read 5 books a week. I'd summarize them. I'd do all the notes so that he's a very busy man. He had to be sort of come in and ready to record these shows. And so that was my part of my job. And what an opportunity to read so much and learn, as you're part of your job. So it was amazing.
What were you most impressed with about that experience working with Dr. Oz?
So many things. First of all, how many really smart, incredible scientists and physicians and public health leaders, like all the people who came on to that show as guests were like extraordinary people whom I got to meet, from Oprah herself and Gayle King to all these people in the medical field who were trying to pull together information in a way that was salient and actionable and interesting. And I give Dr. Oz and Oprah so much credit because at that time, no one else had ever said, could health information be entertaining and interesting? This is like before the wellness movement. This is before all the blogs. This is before the podcasts. And no one had tried to say, how do we make health information something that anyone could have access to and own and use in their daily lives? And that was super cool. I learned so much. I learned so much about how to communicate, I think, health information in a way that's interesting and actionable, both from him and from Oprah, but also from, again, all the guests on the show. And so it's such an amazing education, truly.
One of your professors made a comment about why would anybody come to Columbia Medical School in hopes of becoming a primary care physician, because obviously those are the physicians that are least likely to be reimbursed by insurance companies, and it's not very lucrative and blah, blah, blah. So talk a little bit about your motivation to become primary care physician and how you were able to sort of navigate that snobby attitude around, doing something a little bit more specialized.
I was the daughter of a primary care physician. My dad was a PCP, and I don't think I really understood when I went to med school that these different fields were valued so differently, and that surgeons were considered these like gods, and that fields like ophthalmology and dermatology were paid these like huge sums of money. And everyone would make fun of the people who wanted to go into those fields, that they just wanted the like, easy cash money fields. I just didn't know, you're a kid, you're just going to school, you want to learn, you want to help people. I didn't know that these fields, fairly or unfairly in many cases, candidly, have these stereotypes, right? And we need all these fields, but I didn't understand that those biases were what they were. And so I'm in my third year, I guess, of medical school, which is the year that traditionally you spend, 5-6 weeks in each specialty: internal medicine and OBGYN and surgery. And you're there to help, and then you're also there to learn what it's all about. And in a neurosurgery OR, the neurosurgeon's there and the skull is open, and he's literally like dangling a tumor off of a forceps. And this sounds really grotesque, I'm sure, if anyone's listening to this, and I don't mean to be laughing, but if you think about the absurdity of the moment, that's why I'm smiling, because it was just sort of, as students, you're just standing there with your eyes wide open, like, can't believe what you're seeing. Also can't believe you're just sort of having a conversation with this person as they're, going through this procedure. It's sort of amazing. And he asked each of us what we wanted to go into. And one of the other women in my student group said primary care. And he said, why would you want to do that? That's such a waste of a spot at Columbia. And so I quickly changed my answer. I can't remember what I said. I think I said I wasn't sure yet. But I think that in that moment was a realization, and an important one, not just of some of the sort of stereotypes in medicine, but also of just how we as a country have valued the most important part of medicine, which is our primary care field, which is there to really be the one that knows us and takes care of us. And yet it's paid the least and sort of taken the least seriously. And that really doesn't make sense when you think about a country where we talk a lot about rising healthcare costs and chronic disease exploding. We have it sort of backwards. And so it was a big wake-up call.
Okay, so can we talk a little bit about the early pre-Parsley days of you as a practicing doctor? Talk about the business of medicine. Like, a lot of these appointments only last for 10 or 15 minutes, and a lot of prescriptions are getting prescribed. Like, what's going on behind the scenes that the patient would not know about, that is ultimately unsustainable for everybody's highest and best good?
So, when I was in my training at Columbia, Mount Sinai, amazing places here in New York, and especially in our outpatient clinic. So a bunch of the training you do is in the hospital, where people are already, admitted for very serious conditions. And then a bunch of it's outpatient, where, you think of like you and me going to the doctor. And most patient care in our country is happening outpatient, right? It's happening in clinics. It's not, the majority isn't happening in hospitals. But in those clinics, I remember I had 15-minute visits with the patient, and those visits were so rushed. You were trying to do so much in those visits, and you do this like quick basic physical exam, and you figure out all the stuff that's going on and everything that's happened since the last time they saw you, and all the specialists they saw, and the procedures that they had, and what drugs are they taking, and are they actually taking those medications? I mean, it was like, it felt like just a race to the finish line. And I would spend 2 of those 15 minutes, like 2 of those very precious 15 minutes, printing out prescriptions, 4 to a page, and handing somebody a stack of 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 pages of prescriptions, 4 to a page, for drugs and referrals to specialists. And the data said that 50% of drugs are never even filled at the pharmacy. No one even picks them up. And the specialist visits would take months to get to and result in another procedure and maybe an added another drug. And then they'd be on back to me. And I saw that all the things I was writing prescriptions and referrals for, high blood sugar, high blood pressure, migraine headaches, joint pain, autoimmune conditions, infertility, anxiety and depression, gastrointestinal issues, hormone stuff, all of it. The things that everyone is living with for years and maybe decades, all of us, that these conditions were highly interrelated to each other. They were highly multifactorial. They were very dependent on what we were eating and how we were moving and how we were managing stress. And yet there was no place on my prescription pad for food in any serious way, or for movement, or for meditation, or for any of the things that were the root cause drivers of some of these conditions, let alone did I have nowhere near enough time with a patient to ever address those things. And so what I saw was that we'd created a revolving door between primary care and specialists that was just spinning faster and faster and faster, while people got sicker and sicker and had a longer and longer and longer list of drugs to take. And I was just like, gosh, this is not going to work. Like this is not working. And so that really inspired me to say, what would a system look like that fixed a lot of this if we were to sort of start fresh, start anew, start outside the system, be a little bit radical in the way that we want to approach it and do something totally different. And that was a huge learning.
Look, I'm sure you're not the first physician to think about this. What do you think made you take those next steps to actually start this platform? I mean, why you? Is it your exposure to Dr. Oz? Did you have some kind of tech relationships, or
what's that saying? If not me,
was it the yoga? Was it the Vipassana course?
I think it was all those things. I think it was back to, knowing about functional medicine from Dr. Mark Hyman, who I met when I worked for Dr. Oz and had sent me the Institute for Functional Medicine's textbook. And so I knew that there was another way of practicing medicine that was effective, that existed, right? It might not have been widely available, but it did exist. I had started another company in end of high school and early part of my residency with a friend from medical school, and in the tech space in healthcare. He went on to run that company for a long time. It's still out there. And we built a piece of software to help better coordinate care in hospitals. But the experience of starting that company in medical school, I think, meeting my co-founder, and he had 2 companies before medical school. So I was exposed to someone who said, hey, I've started companies. I was like, all right, there's not a lot of this, but it is possible. It exists, right? You can start something from nothing. And so I'd had a little bit of experience by the time I started Parsley of what it was like to get a company off the ground from literally idea in your head to forming a company, forming an organization, building a product, raising a little bit of money. I had seen that, not very much, right? Like I was in that company for a little while, but I'd seen it and had some exposure. And so I think it was those things coupled with my passion for seeing that this care had to be better, and thinking back to my grandmother, how yes, it would have been way better if she had gotten a colonoscopy on time, which is a life-saving screening intervention, and so she needed better primary care than she had had. However, and she needed functional medicine to change the way she ate and lived so that she didn't get colon cancer in the first place. And so it was just this combination of having this light bulb moment, seeing the forest for the trees, thinking about what could be possible, and enough exposure to people and places who said, hey, let's do this a different way. I mean, even the radio show that we did with Dr. Oz and Harpo, or Oprah's production company, was the startup in and of itself. It was something that had never existed before I was in the first year of getting off the ground. So, I don't know, all those things came together.
I read one of Elon Musk's biographies, and he talked about how when he started Tesla, he was like on the brink of losing everything, going bankrupt, and all of that. And I'm just curious what your experience was, because, you're mom, you're seeing patients, your wife, you're trying to start this company. I'm sure there was a lot going on, and people may look at you now. You've gotten funding. It's just turned into this huge thing. It looks very obvious now in hindsight, right? Take us a little bit behind the scenes in the early days. What was that like when you were getting that off the ground while trying to do everything else?
In 2016, I didn't have kids yet. So now sometimes I'm like, oh,
Well, you had all the time in the world then.
maybe that was why I had the time and energy to come up with this harebrained scheme. And now the train has left the station and it's too late. I'm kidding, sort of, people. But yes, I did not have kids yet. 2016 is sort of when we I had been experimenting with a medical practice that was just me before that. But then 2016, we formed the company. We started hiring some people. We started seeing about raising some money. And listen, I've learned so much. It is so hard. No one taught me how to fundraise. No one taught me how to think about operations and legal and real estate and marketing and, healthcare compliance laws and how to deal with insurance companies and all of the different things that I've had to learn along the way. And so, I remember 2017 when I was pregnant, and that was when we raised our first little seed round of funding, was sort of end of 2016 going into 2017. I was trying to close this first round of funding then. And I really had no idea how to raise money at this point. I'd been exposed to it a little bit in my first startup, but not very much. And I'd never been responsible for it on my own. And so, and I didn't have, I'm a doctor, I'm a woman, I'm in New York. I'm not somebody with Silicon Valley connections. I was really in over my head, and I was due with the baby in February. I was trying to close the round before baby. I was I'm just going to close the money and have the baby. Everything's going to work out peachy. And that did not happen. So I'm freaking out after I had my son, thinking this whole thing is over. Who was I to start this company? I don't know what I'm doing. I felt like I was sort of sliding down the side of a building by my fingernails. It was one of those moments. I've got this new baby. I had some money committed, but not enough. And I went to breakfast with one of my advisors. And he said and he was a healthcare guy and a startup guy, one of those people who knew how to talk to all the Silicon Valley people. And he was like, Robin, where's the Robin I know who could give a TED talk in your sleep? Pull yourself together and go raise some effing money. And I kind of, needed a kick in the pants, basically, to realize that there are no rules. It didn't all have to happen by a certain date that I had arbitrarily set in my mind, that there wasn't one way to do things. And maybe other people would raise more money than me, or raise faster money than me, or have a better business plan than me. But you know what? I knew that this medicine needed to exist in the world and that people needed this care. And so I sort of pulled myself together and dusted myself off and wiped off the tears and went back out there, and ended up closing more money than I had originally intended on raising from better investors who ended up being instrumental in us being able to raise our first kind of big round of funding in 2018, which was our Series A, which is when we really started about 4 years ago, kind of growing this thing. So that was it. But it taught me just to kind of get back up, even when I've been knocked down, or I've knocked myself down, or I've decided that I'm knocked down, and to find the resilience to keep building this thing for the patients who need us.
How has your idea of success evolved since, college up until now?
Oh my gosh, it's changed so much. In college, I think I thought of success as having a certain degree, or having a great job, basically. I think that's what I thought it was. And now I would say it's really about living my life with meaning and purpose. And since I've had kids, it's changed again to be just about being able to spend time with my family and being able to be on the journey with them, which I could never have imagined before I had them. So yeah, those are the things now. Healthcare companies are really hard, and all companies are hard, but there are honestly days where I'm I just wish I sold socks. Like selling socks seems a lot easier than so trying to like, you know, basically Trojan horse holistic medicine into the healthcare system. But I wouldn't do anything else. That's the meaning and purpose part. And then when that's all hard and challenging, as it still is, every year presents new challenges and new moments when I have no idea what to do. I then now have this really cool family that I get to look at and just be endlessly excited about.
And then final question. So current day Robin can go back and whisper some words of wisdom to 2016 Robin. What do you tell yourself, your younger self?
First of all, you're building something amazing. You're building something people need. You're building something that will have incredible outcomes data to back it up. So keep going, because all these patients you're seeing, there's actually real data coming that's going to show how powerful this care is. And I think the thing that my like older self will always keep telling my younger self is that it all turns out so much better than you ever could have imagined. So that like whatever you're imagining, it's going to be even better than that.
Beautiful. Well, your book, State Change, I've been to see a couple of functional medicine practitioners. I've done telemedicine as well. And I think it's the closest that you can get to being able to not self-diagnose, because you obviously don't want to you want to get a professional diagnosis, but just being able to kind of understand your body a little bit better without being overwhelmed by too many scientific terms that you have to look up. And you do a really great job of making it accessible and including a lot of the basic questions that I think everybody should be asking themselves when it comes to exercise and diet and lifestyle. So if that was your intention, then I say job well done, because that's exactly what I got from it. And I hope everybody listening to this gets a chance to pick up the book. And let's say somebody picks up the book and they're really into it and they want to take it a step further and get some professional input. What should they do?
Well, thank you for that, because that was the goal. And then, if you're looking to see, holistic primary care, functional primary care, Parsley Health is that. We're available nationwide. We're starting to take some insurance. And if we don't take insurance, the monthly fee includes all your visits with the doctor and all your visits with the health coach and unlimited kind of always on care. So parsleyhealth.com, we're in almost every state. And we have tens of thousands of patients nationwide working with us. So I hope you'll check it out and we can give you some help. And otherwise, definitely check out the book, because there are a lot of very easy, very actionable, very simple things that you can get started on just on your own.
I just thought of one more question. Parsley, right? Parsley is a garnish. You put it on a dish to make the dish, I guess, to punch it up a little bit. Was that part of the intention behind parsley, or what was the story with that?
No, I mean, it was really,
or it was just like, available on GoDaddy.com and you thought, I'm going to do that.
Wasn't even available. I had to end up going and buying it. No, it was, I wanted something bright and fresh and clean and memorable and green that people would just be easy to say and easy to remember. And I was hanging out with my best girlfriend from growing up in Baltimore, and she like knows who celebrities are and, reads People magazine. And I like live under a rock a bit when it comes to that stuff. So I said a bunch of names to her and I said Parsley Health, and she's like, I like that. And I was like, well, if you like it, then the world will too. So, and then it's done.
If you like that video, you're going to love the next one. Click this thumbnail right here, and I'll see you over there.